Hello and welcome to I Have a Disability and I'm Graduating. What's Next? Virtual workshop presented to you by the Experiential Learning Hub. My name is Carolina Racton and I'm a career advisor in the Experiential Learning Hub, and I'll be facilitating the workshop today. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we get started, I'd like to begin with a territorial acknowledgement from the University of Guelph. It is with great respect that the Experiential Learning Hub acknowledges that the University of Guelph resides on the ancestral lands of the Attawandaron people and the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We uphold the significance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant and the continuing relationship our Indigenous neighbors have with this land. We recognize that today this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging them reminds us of our relationships to this land where we learn and work. So here's a summary of our workshop content today. We're going to talk about your graduating year to-do list. What are the top things you should be focusing on right now as you're getting ready to graduate? We begin with the importance of Googling yourself, understanding what makes a strong resume and cover letter, preparing and polishing your interview skills, and tracking your job search efforts. Then we move on to understand your rights related to disability, consider whether you'll require employment-related accommodations, and consider disclosure of your disability. We will finish off with helping you know where to go for job search help and a brief discussion of the importance of developing some comfort with networking. So let's get started. Number 1 on the to-do list is quite simple. You need to Google yourself. As you can see, 70% of employers use social media to screen candidates before hiring, and 69% of employers are using online search engines to research candidates. Make sure that what they're finding about you is what you want them to see. Clean up anything that may portray you in a negative light to an employer. We're all humans who don't act perfectly 100% of the time, but the job search process is a competitive one, and you certainly do not want to give employers an opportunity to disqualify you from the hiring process before they've even had a chance to meet you. The next thing on the to-do list is understand how to build a strong resume and cover letter. If you've never been to our department and met with a career advisor or peer helper for guidance around this, now is the perfect time to book an appointment. In this portion of the workshop, I'm briefly going to outline a few of the key things you should know right now about resumes and cover letters. So first things first, resumes and cover letters should be targeted to the specific role and employer. Gone are the days when you can submit the same resume and cover letter and just replace the company name and address for every employer you apply to. You really need to read the job posting, understand the skills, experiences, and qualifications the employer is asking for, and use their language and keywords to target your application to the job. Strong resumes and cover letters should also be well organized and free of grammar and spelling errors. Employers are bombarded with hundreds of applications and can be looking for reasons to make their piles smaller. Don't give them a reason with a spelling or grammar error. With regards to resumes specifically, resumes should have bullets that follow the WHO formula. This means that your bullets should provide information about what you did, how you did it, and the outcome. For example, rather than saying responsible for answering customer phone calls, which really only speaks to what you did, you should be more specific and speak also to how you went about answering customer phone calls, which can involve mentioning the skill you used to get this task done. You should also state the positive result of doing so. For example, answered over 50 customer phone calls per day using strong oral communication skills, ensuring customer needs were met consistently within a 24-hour period. Lastly, resumes should be a maximum of 2 pages long. Again, employers have many applicants for each role they hire for, and generally speaking, they prefer shorter applications to longer ones. Moving on to cover letters. Cover letters demonstrate that you've researched the role and the company. This is really big. Most people whose cover letters I review don't actually convey that they've done any homework on the company. This is a major lost opportunity to stand out to the employer and show that you've taken the time to understand what they're all about and why you're a great fit. Try to find something a little bit unique about them that resonates with you. Cover letters also need to be formatted like formal business letter. There are samples on our website at the link provided. Cover letters should also be a maximum of 1 page, the shorter the better. If this all sounds like a lot, please book an appointment with a career advisor or peer helper to have some support around writing these documents. The next thing to do is work on preparing and polishing your interview skills. I encourage you to schedule a mock interview in the Experiential Learning Hub to practice your interview skills and get feedback on how you're doing. Research and prepare answers to common interview questions. It's also helpful to learn and practice something called the STAR method, particularly when answering behavioral-based interview questions, which are those questions that begin with, "Tell me about a time when." STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. Following this formula, you want to describe what was the actual situation at hand, what was the task you were faced with, what was the action you took to handle that situation and complete the task, and what was the result. Again, please feel free to reach out to us if you need more help navigating this formula. Writing out and practicing your answers to "Tell me about yourself" will help you greatly as well. This is a question where we can end up rambling, so having a script to help you remain on track is great. It's important to note here that everything you say should be related back to your qualifications for the job. Next on the list is track your job search efforts. Too often I have had students come to me that say that they've applied to a job and we go to look at what the job posting said together, and that posting is no longer available because it's expired. If that individual is to get an interview, they don't have anything to refer to help them prepare for the interview, and they may not remember all the details of the job. So remember to save copies of job ads you're applying to in order to prevent scenarios like this from happening to you. Ideally, you will also be tracking where you've applied, the date you applied, the position you applied for, and any other contact you've made with the company, and the required next steps, like following up with the company after 1 to 2 weeks have passed. Keeping this information all in one place, like on the tracker you see here on the screen, will allow you to remain in control of your job search and prevent you from losing sight of where you left off. So before we move on to the next item on your to-do list, I wanted to introduce the Ontario Human Rights Code Prohibited Grounds of Discrimination. It's against the law for employers to discriminate against you based on any of these grounds on the screen. This means that in the job search or employment process, by law, you should not be treated differently from other candidates because of your status in any of these categories. In most cases, employers should not request or require information about you relating to any of these items. Job searching can be stressful enough, and it's important that you know your rights and you understand what kind of information you actually need to provide to employers. You may have noticed that some job applications do ask questions about some of these items. If you recall, your answers to these questions are optional. When employers do ask questions pertaining to any of these grounds, it is usually to help them ensure they're equally representing diverse groups in their employment process. You can learn more about the prohibited grounds of discrimination on the Ontario Human Rights Code website. As I've introduced, it's important that you understand your rights related to the employment process, especially when you're an individual with a disability. The next thing you should know is that employers have a duty to accommodate individuals with disabilities, and in the same respect, they have a duty to accommodate any individuals who fall into the groups protected under the Ontario Human Rights Code. This means that employers are legally required to provide accommodation to job seekers and employers with disabilities who require them, so that individuals with disabilities can participate in the workforce equally to those without disabilities. So some things to note about accommodation are that if you require an accommodation, it is your responsibility to make your needs known and participate in the accommodation process. Employers have a duty to accommodate and should accept your accommodation request in good faith unless there are legitimate reasons for acting otherwise. This means that in most instances, stating that you have a disability that requires accommodation should be enough information for the employer. You do not need to state your medical diagnosis. Please know that the accommodation process often goes much more smoothly when you are clear about your needs and positive about your ability to succeed with the requested accommodations in place. It can be helpful to think about what accommodations have worked for you in the past and share those examples with your employer. Lastly, physical disabilities and mental health disabilities should be treated and accommodated equally. They're both considered disabilities under the code and should be treated the same. If you're feeling unsure about any of this, please feel free to talk to a career advisor and review the information on the Ontario Human Rights Code website to develop confidence around understanding your own rights. Moving our way down the to-do list, we move on to consider whether you will require employment-related accommodations. A good starting point is to think about what accommodations you have required while you have been a U of G student or at other places of employment, and how those may translate into the workplace going forward. There are some examples of accommodations on the slide here, such as allowing for short-term and long-term disability leave and allowing for a flexible work schedule. Our department has created a resource available on our Resources for Students with Disabilities page on our website to show you how some of your accommodations here at the University of Guelph might translate to an employment setting. Please use the resource to help you navigate whether you may require accommodations in the employment process. If you think you may require accommodations, the next item on the list is to consider disclosure. Disclosure refers to telling an employer that you have a disability and that you require accommodations. When you're considering whether to disclose, you should ask yourself, will my disability impact my ability to compete in the hiring process or my ability to do the job itself? If so, you may want to consider disclosure. If you don't think your disability will impact you in these areas, disclosure may not be necessary. Either way, the choice to disclose is yours to make. For many students who I've met with, disclosure can be a scary thing to think about doing. A well thought out plan can make a world of difference, and a career advisor would be happy to help you navigate the decision. Next on the list is know where to go for job search help. You're moving on from the University of Guelph soon and may be wondering how you can continue to access support with your job search. The good news is that there are many options. For one, career advisors in the EL Hub are available to alumni free of charge for 1 year after your convocation date. There are also disability-specific job boards and organizations like Lime Connect and Specialisterna who provide job search and career support and job postings specific to individuals with disabilities. There are also many other options in Ontario like community employment service providers. The link closest to the bottom of this slide can be used to search for supports in your home area. The final item on your graduating year to-do list is to develop comfort with networking. As you can see on this slide, at least 70% of jobs are not even published. What this means is that if you are only applying online to the jobs you see, you're missing out on a lot of jobs that people tend to get through the connections they have made. Try to practice and develop some comfort around networking to increase your chances of landing a job. Here are some tips to get you started. Start with who you know. Is there anyone that you know that might be able to refer you to somebody who works in your industry or in a target company that you have your eyes set on? Ask them to make a connection for you. By the way, even though we're all social distancing right now, networking is still very much possible. You could be connecting virtually using platforms like Skype or MS Teams or even by phone or email as a start. Think of questions you may want to ask in advance and write them down to guide you in your conversation. Also, when you're networking, you don't want to ask for a job, especially if it's somebody you really don't know. In the early stages, networking is all about relationship building and information sharing in the hopes that your efforts could lead to a job down the road. Well, that concludes our graduating year to-do list. If you have questions, please book a virtual appointment with a career advisor, and we'd be happy to help you work through any of these topics that you listened to today. Thanks again for listening today. Please don't forget to sign up for our e-news and follow our social media accounts to stay up to date about what our department is up to and learn about interesting job opportunities and events. Stay safe and be well. We wish you all the best during your last few weeks of your final year at the University of Guelph.